Jennifer Kendrick is in handcuffs, and she's going to jail after she's charged with allowing her boyfriend to abuse her 3-year-old daughter, Paisley. Her boyfriend, Jerome Kums, is charged with murdering her 3-year-old daughter, Paisley Brown. In this episode of Criminal Motives, I'll take you through the horrific way that investigators say that Paisley Brown died and how things got to this point. I'm Matthew Pfeiffer, a therapist who gives my thoughts and reactions to high-profile true crime cases. If that's the type of content that you enjoy, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. With that being said, let's get this episode started. I want to give a quick trigger warning because we're going to be talking about extreme levels of child abuse. And so we're going to talk about themes of death and dying, and we're also going to be talking about domestic violence. And this is the reason why I partnered with BetterHelp. If you are considering therapy, be sure to check out BetterHelp. You can work with a licensed therapist from the comfort and convenience of your home. You can work as an individual. You can do work as a couple. They even have therapists who work with teens. If you use the links in the description box down below, you'll get 15% off your first month of therapy. If you are considering therapy, be sure to choose BetterHelp.
You don't think I respect my baby's to her funeral Sunday?
This little girl, 3-year-old Paisley Brown, is dead. Her family described her as fun, loving, energetic, a little girl with a big smile. But the people who were supposed to love and protect Paisley, her own mother and her mother's boyfriend, allegedly failed her so badly. And this is so really hard to hear. What you're going to hear is horrific. Investigators say her mother's boyfriend punched her in the chest, dropped her on the floor, and ran water over her face in the shower, all while she was bound with a robe, tie, and painter's tape. On February 19th, sheriff's deputies in Marion County, Florida, got the call that every law enforcement officer dreads. A child was unresponsive at a home in Citra. When they arrived, they found 3-year-old Paisley Brown. She was already gone. And the man detectives said was inside, her mother's boyfriend, Jerome Kums. Deputies said he was trying to leave. Investigators say bystanders pointed to Coombs and said he was the one who did it. Within hours, Coombs was in cuffs, charged then with aggravated child abuse. But as investigators soon discovered, the person they were looking for wasn't just the man accused in Paisley's death. It was also the one person Paisley should have been able to trust the most in this world, her own mother. And to help us understand what happened here and what's happened since, we're going to bring in Lieutenant Paul Bloom of the Marion County Sheriff's Office in just a little bit. I actually spoke with him shortly after Paisley died, before her mother was ever arrested.
One of the gut-wrenching parts of this is that we were being told by another juvenile that was in the home that they heard this attack taking place. And they knew what it was. They recognized the sound of this attack, according to their statement. We're not looking at the finger pointing and blame. We're looking for the facts of the case. We're still investigating. It's still an active case. We want to find out anything we can. History, how long has this been going on in the home? And we want to know, did the mom know about this or not? What did she know?
Now, that was Lieutenant Bloom speaking with us shortly after Paisley's death. Back then, he said they were still investigating what the mother knew. Now we have answers. On March 4th, 2 weeks after Paisley died, Jennifer Kendrick was arrested. She now faces 2 counts of child neglect, plus a probation violation from a prior drug case. Investigators said the abuse in the home extended beyond Paisley. On March 5th, Coombs was charged with child abuse and aggravated child abuse for alleged crimes against other children living under that roof. Both of them are sitting in the Marion County Jail, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
So at this time, you're being arrested for the charge of aggravated child abuse.
Now, one of the things I want to bring up, it's common in cases where there's abuse from one parent whether it be the father or the mother or a step parent, it's very common. You'll see people on social media say things, or I should say, there's oftentimes a debate on whether or not the mom, and if the father is the abusive one, or if the mother is the abusive one, should also be charged. A lot of people say, yes, they should be. And then some people say, no, they shouldn't be. And the reason why people who say, no, they shouldn't be is because of domestic abuse, coercive control. And oftentimes people say that, that they should not be charged because they weren't a part of it. They were in a situation where they were also being abused and victimized. And so they themselves were in trouble and would face possible harm and possibly being killed in some situations, if they were to say something. And to that, I say every situation is very different. So we have this saying, right? Believe all victims. And I get and I understand that on one end, and on the other end, what I say to that is that we need to listen to all victims, but at the same time, we need to look at situations like this, because what ends up happening is that some people hide in plain sight under the shroud of victimhood. So in this situation, you're going to find out that the mother did know. And I'm going to talk more about that and the reasons why someone might allow for that to happen. And sometimes from the outside looking in, it can look as though someone doesn't know. It can look as though someone, they're just aloof to it. And sometimes this is a defense mechanism to allow for the perpetrator, in this situation, the boyfriend, because the person, right, in this situation, the mother, needs help and needs assistance. And so they allow for the person to do harmful things to their children because of the strain and the stress that they themselves are experiencing. Now, I'm not saying that's okay. I'm not saying that is that should be allowed or anything like that. But I am saying that this type of behavior can oftentimes be seen where people will allow for horrible, horrible things to happen, not only to themselves, but also to their children, because someone has money, because someone is good in bed, because someone has a really nice house, and oftentimes because they themselves benefit from allowing abuse to happen to their children. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Let's continue with this.
Right through here. In the car right over there. Do you need any water or anything like that before we get there?
Is there any numbers?
Once we get to the jail, you'll be able to ask them, all right?
So they still got my phone and stuff?
Yeah, they'll be able to get out of your phone.
Double lock these so they don't get any tighter on you.
Yes. When they being off on a probation, how is this gonna work? You're gonna get violated. Okay, that's an automatic. I can't control that, all right?
That's if you want. If you want to walk out the way. Walk with me.
Try to just set it on my car when we get me.
Which is your pocket?
This one? Everyone's standing around?
The one right here?
Mm-hmm.
Which side you want on?
I'll put her on this side.
Which side?
This side?
I gave up. Yeah.
Do you have anything in your pockets that are in focus technique?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna pat you down, all right?
Can you go pay my respects to my baby to her funeral Sunday?
Is there anything I missed? No? Okay. Have a seat for me.
Those are the moments Jerome Kums and Jennifer Kendrick were handcuffed and taken away. So to even attempt to understand what police say happened to this little girl, let's go back to the very beginning. According to the sheriff's office, Jerome Kums moved in with Jennifer Kendrick in January 2026. According to investigators, he and Kendrick met on Facebook dating just a few months earlier. By the time he moved in, he became the primary caregiver for all of Kendrick's children. Lieutenant.
So let me pause here because this kind of goes into some of the things that I was just alluding to and talking about. So number one, before I get into all of that, stop online dating. For those of you who don't know, I have another channel where I talk about dating and relationships, those sorts of that sort of thing. It's horrible, right? I'm not someone who says that you should stay single forever or anything like that, but online dating isn't what it was, let's say 10 years ago. And the pushback I typically get is, but Matt, my best friend met their husband online, but Matt, my best friend met their wife online, and they've been together for X amount of years, and they're lovely and they're happy. And I'm happy for people who it has worked for. But in 2026, the risk is not worth the reward. It's become a marketplace for people who are manipulative, abusive, controlling, people who are looking to abuse children, those sorts of things, to target people who are very vulnerable. So if you are online dating, I would encourage for you not to. I'll have links in the description box down below for you to follow my other content where I talk about dating relationships, where we can get you into a healthy relationship. But I said all that to say that with her meeting him online on a dating app, Facebook Marketplace or dating, Facebook dating, whatever it is, and for her to move him in within a handful of months, most likely both of them, number one, he needed a place to stay and she probably needed someone to babysit. Flat out. Right. She, from what I understand, she worked at a pizzeria. And so not likely making a ton of money, things like that. And so the likelihood that she not only needed financial help, not only needed help with the children, not only needed help with babysitting, possibly needed help with, quote, disciplining the children. And I say that, I put that in quotes, but it's going to become an important part of this video, because a lot of times when people are struggling with children, multiple children, and they're struggling with keeping order and structure and disciplining the children, and maybe they don't know what discipline looks like themselves, and they're already strained financially, oftentimes people can say the right things, so to speak, right? I'm sure that some of the things that Jerome said to her was that he would help discipline, that he would help, quote, get them in line. And those things on the surface, to someone who's already at their wit's end of trying to maintain a household of 3 children on a very little salary. It doesn't sound like she had any roommates or anything like that. Probably sounds very enticing. But this gets into something that I talk about on my other channel, into what we call a trauma bond, right? Where now all of a sudden you are in a situation where not only are you falling for this person very quickly, moving in very quickly, falling for this person very fast romantically, but you also need this person very quickly, right? And so you just judging by the demographics of my audience, most of us at this point either know or have experienced people who have moved in relationships way too quickly, only to find out that relationship becomes toxic. And then people find themselves in a situation where they struggle unwinding that relationship because they're over reliant on that person financially, over reliant on that person for housing, over reliant on that person for their children. And so now all of a sudden, internally and subconsciously, we're also looking at this person as our own caretaker as well. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit more here. Some of it I can't get too much into here, but I definitely go into it a lot on my other channel. So make sure you check it out. Again, I'll have the links in the description or in the show notes.
Bloom says that 5 children were living in that house and they ranged in age from 1 to 9, and Paisley was the youngest. She was just 3 years old. And according to court documents, Coombs had a system for what he called discipline. According to the arrest affidavit, Coombs told investigators that Paisley had developed a habit of reaching into her diaper and smearing feces. His solution? Detectives said Coombs told them he would bind her. According to the affidavit, he would bind the child victim's hands together with a white robe tie belonging to Ms. Kendrick. And when she figured out how to use her feet to remove the tie, the affidavit alleges he started to tape her legs together with blue painter's tape from her thighs to her ankles, leaving space in between. That's how he told police Paisley slept night after night. Now,
so one of the things I want to bring up here, and I hate to get so detailed with this, but so I want to look at this progression, right? So at first, so Paisley has this behavior where she's taking feces out of her diaper, smearing it all over the walls, throwing it all over the place. And when Jennifer, the mother, was single, this was probably something that was extremely overwhelming. With having 5 children, very little salary, and very little to no help. Right? Doesn't sound like she had a lot of help coming from her parents or anything like that, or friends. And so now we enter Jerome, who says that he has a system. Right. And you remember just a little while ago, I talked about how he had a phrase of discipline, right? A plan of discipline that he had for the children. For someone who's already overwhelmed of this type of behavior up until them being arrested, this probably sounds enticing. This probably sounds alluring, on top of the fact that she's already falling in love with him. Now, none of this makes this okay, right? I'm just, obviously I'm a therapist, so I just want to show people how people can get into this situation. And some of you might end up if you're finding yourself in a situation like this, or moving too quickly, this is how things slowly progress. I doubt, right? With most people, people who I've met with, people I've done interviews with, things like that. If you ask someone just straight out, would you ever allow for your child to be treated by a random person like this, and describe the behavior that Jerome was doing? Most people, even the most egregious people, would say no. But what happens is there's a progression. So he moves into the house, and it likely doesn't go immediately to the painter's tape, for example, right? So even in this description, it actually started out with the robe, right? The robe ties, and the robe tie was loose enough where Paisley was able to get loose. So I'm sure that even if there were some pushback, it likely was more along the lines of, oh, it's not going to hurt. It's not hurting her. She's even able to get out. It's not that big of a deal. Not thinking about or understanding not only how abusive it actually is, but the progressive nature with it, where that was just the starting point, right? And then it ended up with painter's tape. And then what's the next step, right? Because obviously we're still, it's not real actual discipline. It's actually not only abuse. It's not only abuse, but not only a form of control, but a form of abuse, obviously, right? And so this was never going to work anyway. So now you are in a position. The abusive person is in a position where they have to do this all the time. Whenever I believe she's 2 or 3 years old, where they have to do this every single time she misbehaves, because they don't have any true discipline type of skills necessary to like actually raise a child properly, right? And so what happens next? So even if this didn't escalate, even if Paisley were still here and this behavior were to continue, it would not stop at painter's tape. There would be something else later on down the road, whether it be zip ties, whether it be rope, whether it be chain. And the reason why I bring this up, if you go back to another episode that I did about Ruby Frankie, that's exactly what happened. It started out with just them being in a room. Then it progressed to, I believe, tape. Then it progressed to handcuffs. Then it progressed to handcuffs and tape. And so with abuse, with people who are abusive, it typically never starts out with the extreme thing that we see and hear on TV. It's a slow progression, and that's how it gets to a point where it's so exasperated, because the person who's in it, you may have heard the quote or the analogy of the frog in boiling water. If you put a frog in boiling water, it hops right out. But if you put a frog in water and then turn the stove on and allow for the water to start boiling, the frog will stay there until it boils to death. And that's what happens oftentimes in abusive situations. And again, in this situation, Jennifer is just as guilty. The mother is just as guilty because she was aware of the behavior. And we're going to find out some of the reasons why we know that here in a second.
Fast forward to February 18th, 2026, the night before Paisley died. According to Kendrick's statement to investigators, she worked the late shift at 5 Star Pizza. She got home after 10 p.m. and Paisley was awake in good spirits. The next morning, February 19th, Kendrick says she left around 9:15 a.m. and all of the kids were asleep. Kendrick had errands to run. First the post office, then the DMV, then Happy Nails on East State Road. At 10:29 that morning, she FaceTimed Coombs. On that call, she said she could hear Paisley in the background yelling, "I love you, mommy." At 10:49, Kendrick texted Coombs a photo of her nails. He didn't respond. At 10:58, 9 minutes later, she said she FaceTimed him again. When Coombs told her Paisley was unresponsive, the affidavit says that Kendrick responded saying, "What the F do you mean? Put her on the phone." Coombs panned the camera to Paisley. According to the affidavit, Kendrick saw her daughter, quote, pale and limp. Her eyes were somewhat but barely open, and the area under her eyes appeared very dark and gray in color. Now, if you get that call, what do? You call 911, wouldn't you think? Well, according to investigators, Jennifer Kendrick did not call 911. She did not rush home. Instead, she finished getting her nails done. Then she left the nail salon and called her mother. She called Coombs again, and then she drove home. The affidavit notes that the call for service was received by MCSO at 11:38 a.m., 40 minutes after Ms. Kendrick learned the child victim was unresponsive. So what happened in those 40 minutes? What happened to Paisley? According to Coombs' statement to investigators, here's how he tells it. He said he woke up around 10 a.m. and went to the kitchen to make breakfast. He heard Paisley calling for him from the playpen where she slept, still bound from the night before. He claimed she appeared groggy, But investigators noted a problem with that story. Kendrick had just spoken to Coombs at 10:29 and heard Paisley in the background in good spirits. The affidavit makes clear the child victim was still alive and not groggy when the defendant spoke to Ms. Kendrick just before 10:29 a.m. His actions after that initial call resulted in her death. And so when confronted with the discrepancy, Coombs reportedly made a key admission to detectives, telling them, quote, "He messed up and is a terrible person." Here's what police say he admitted to doing. He picked Paisley up from the playpen. She was still bound, her hands tied, her legs taped. He said she was flailing and kicking, and he dropped her. When she hit the ground, he told investigators she sounded as though she was gasping for air. Then he admitted to popping her 3 times in the chest. But detectives told him popping wouldn't cause the injuries they saw on Paisley's body. So they brought in a doll. And according to the affidavit, Coombs showed them. The defendant demonstrated the way that he popped or struck the child victim with the back of his hand on the doll, primarily using his knuckles. He explained how he dug his knuckles into the child victim's chest after every strike. After the 3rd strike, the child victim appeared to stop breathing, and he realized he took it too far. Instead of calling 911, the affidavit states.
So I want to bring up 2 points here. So the mother getting her nails done sees that that Paisley is not only in distress, but needs immediate help. But what are her priorities? Her priorities are to keep getting her nails done. The situation, the quote that they just had from Coombs, he didn't realize that he took it too far until she was basically gone. And that's what I was talking about when I said that abusive behavior, right? Because the person doesn't actually have proper, in this situation, parenting skills, or if this were a domestic violence situation, I would say relationship skills. They don't have a gauge on knowing what's too far. And get to a point where that abuse leads to death. Because the person who is engaging in abusive behavior is not doing it for your own good or for Paisley's own good or for the child's own good. They're doing it for their own sense of control. They're doing it for their own sense of belittling other people. They're doing it for their own sense of comfort, and they're doing it for their own sense of power. But for the person who is abusive, there's a deficit. And so there's no extent to when that would ever stop. And so this is the reason why, if you are in a situation like this, it's so important for you to leave and get out, not only for your sake, but also for your children's sake. But let's continue.
The defendant removed the tape and wrist tie from the child victim and took her to the bathroom. He turned on the bath and ran water over the child victim in an attempt to revive her. He then placed the child victim in a high chair and attempted to give her some juice, but she spit it up. Meanwhile, Jennifer Kendrick was driving home. When she finally arrived, the affidavit says she observed the child victim sitting in the high chair, limp. It was cold to the touch. That's when she screamed, "My baby is gone. Call 911. Coombs finally made the 911 call. It was 11:38 a.m., 40 minutes after Jennifer Kendrick first learned Paisley was unresponsive. Paramedics rushed Paisley to the hospital. She was pronounced dead at 12:32 p.m. At the hospital, a detective documented obvious signs of outward trauma, namely bruising on her chest, possible ligature marks on the child victim's ankles and wrists. Later during the autopsy, pathologists found blunt force trauma not previously observed on the back of the child victim's head, only visible underneath the skin. The medical examiner ruled her death a homicide. Now, what about the mother? What did Jennifer Kendrick know? A 9-year-old boy in the home told investigators that Coombs, who the children called Elmo, put him in handcuffs every day. He described Coombs punching him in the stomach and chest, leaving bruises. He demonstrated how Coombs would brace himself against a wall and stomp on him violently. According to the affidavit, that same boy told investigators, according to juvenile victim, the defendant was aware and often present when this would take place. On the day of the incident, juvenile victim was handcuffed behind his back. When the defendant arrived at the incident location, he asked to use the restroom, at which time she removed the handcuffs. And then there are the text messages. On January 6, 2026, more than a month before Paisley died, detectives say that Kendrick texted Coombs, "Babe, I know you're raising him with me, but I need the popping with shoe calm down some because I can't have the bruises on him if DCF pop up. If you want to pop them on top, they close or whatever, cool, just no bruises." The very next day, January 7th.
So you see what this goes into what I was just talking about, where she's not asking necessarily for the abuse to stop. She's asking for it to, quote, settle down, because there's a benefit for her to have him around, right? Whether that is watching over the children, whether that is financial. I'm not sure if he's working or if it was just the fact that she doesn't have to pay for babysitting, but for Coombs, this is a way for him to have control, not only over the children, but also over her, also over the finances, also over housing, right? And he benefits this way as well, right? And this is where we start getting into codependency, where both parties are either doing or allowing for unhealthy behavior to happen in the house and happen to one another and to children, those sorts of things, and for toxic behavior to happen because there's beneficials and there's benefits to allowing for those things to happen, right? Again, she didn't ask him to stop. She'd asked him to not make it obvious, right, to where they don't get caught. Right, she was, one of the children testified that she was present whenever they put handcuffs on him. So she's actually okay with the behavior. She's just not okay with them getting caught, with the perception of her being a bad mother, with it ruining their, quote, good times or whatever it is that they have going on. But let's continue.
Detectives say she texted him again. "No more popping. His whole ear is bruised up, so I can't let DCF see that stuff, babe." When investigators confronted Kendrick with this evidence, the affidavit states the defendant admitted that she did not protect her children. Her lack of intervention, despite knowing what the co-defendant was doing, played a role in the death of victim Paisley Brown.
Which is your car?
This one? Everyone standing around?
The one right here?
Mm-hmm.
Which side you want?
Put her on this side.
Which side?
This side? Just turn around for me.
Those are the moments we showed you earlier. Jerome Kums and Jennifer Kendrick, they were handcuffed and they were taken away. And as we mentioned, the charges against Coombs didn't stop with Paisley. What you just heard about, the alleged abuse of that 9-year-old boy, that's what led to the additional charges filed against him on March 5th, child abuse and aggravated child abuse. It's worth looking at the images that both of these people projected to the world. On Facebook, Jerome Kums seemed to fancy himself as something of a digital creator. He posted videos with captions about God, religion, his wife. Jennifer Kendrick's Facebook paints a troubling picture. Just 2 months before Paisley died on December 12th, 2025, she posted, "Right now, I just need some deep condolences. Whenever I'm in a better state of mind, I will let everyone know what's wrong. But right now, this is hard for me to handle." And then on December 28th, just weeks before Coombs moved in, she wrote, "I really can't just wait to walk into a new fresh year with the man who healed me from all the past trauma, who doesn't just love me, but loves my kids too." That man, the one she said healed her trauma and loved her kids, is now charged with murdering her 3-year-old daughter, Paisley.
So I wanted to stop it here because this alludes into a trauma bond, which I typically talk about more on my other channel. But I'm sure that he convinced her that he was doing this out of care. And this is something that is very common with abusive people, is that they're doing it because they love you so much. They're doing it because they care so much, right? And no one else would put up with this type of behavior from the kids or from you or whatever. And so even though this happens over a period of time, that seems like it's happening like over a slow period of time. Keep in mind, all this happened in a span of months. I believe they said that they had only been dating for a handful of months. They met and moved in together like over a couple months, and so it's important to catch this type of behavior quickly, but it's also important to you hear people talk so much about self-love, being able to take care of yourself without depending. So it's kind of this fine line. We need other people, but at the same time, we need community, and we need other people. But what tends to happen is that when you yourself and your children are at a deficit, you will begin to allow for bad behavior and bad actors to do certain things because in your mind, having some help, right, is better than having zero at all, or having some love is better than having zero at all. So then you find yourself putting up with behavior like this. And then not only that, but also parading about it online. And so getting additional, attention and adoration from other people and validation from other people. Because I'm sure when she posted these type of things online, and when he posted things like that online, you deserve this, and I'm glad that you finally found the love of your life. And so it puts additional pressure to keep the facade going. And not only that, but in some situations, some people, when they don't post and they don't say certain things, that person can become, in this situation, Jerome, can become even more abusive as well. But let's continue.
And a man who says he's Paisley's biological father seemed to be trying to warn others about the mother of his children way before this occurred. Back in October of 2025, 4 months before Paisley died, he posted to Facebook, "As a concerned parent, I am reaching out for assistance in locating my children who have been denied access to me by their mother, Jennifer Kendrick, since June. Despite my efforts, I have only seen them a handful of times since then. As their primary caregiver since birth, I have been significantly impacted by our separation, having lost everything." He claimed 2 of his children were in a different town while his 4-year-old son was being cared for by others, as Kendrick, in his words, engaged in illicit activities. His plea at the time, "If anyone encounters Jennifer Kendrick or sees my children, please notify me. What steps can I take to resolve this situation?" Now that question hanging in the air, his daughter is gone, and her mother and her mother's boyfriend sit in jail. He has set up a GoFundMe to cover funeral expenses, the cost of clothing and hygiene items for Paisley's siblings, and to help secure housing for his family. And this case is sparking a bigger conversation. There's a petition calling for change, the Paisley Brown Child Protection and Accountability Act. It would require mandatory background checks on any adult with access to children in the reunification process, and automatic safety plans when a partner has a history of violence. So I'd like to.
So a reason why I wanted to pause here is that I've talked about gender bias in previous cases before, and I want to talk about gender bias when it comes to co-parenting, when it comes to divorce. We see people, and oftentimes it is what it is, where you have a father pleading to see his children and things like that. And you hear a lot of times people will say, and they'll, well, you must have done something to push her away. You must have, she must be running from something and keeping the kids safe. And sometimes even women will say that. But the problem is that when we allow for people to have these blanket moments, right, where we kind of say that this is the situation, this is true of every single situation like that, right, and there's no story on the opposite side that can be true. We when I say we as a society put ourselves in these type of dynamics where there could be a lot of people, right, that are pleading with honesty, right, that no, I'm concerned, fathers genuinely concerned for their kids because the mother is bringing their children around, uncertain people, right, from bad actors and abusive men, and they're genuinely not allowed to see their children. We can't say that that all mothers are good, right? That that every single one of them is not putting their children in harm's way, and we have to start understanding that I hate saying that there's two sides to every story, because I think there's a lot of people who misuse that phrase, but we have to understand that some of these situations do need further investigation, whether that be in the court of law, that there's some people that do need further assistance to help locate their kids, to understand like what rights they do have. A lot of fathers in situations like this don't realize that they actually do have rights. They don't know what to do. Sometimes they're actually given poor advice, and whether it be from other men or just from people that don't understand that fathers have equal rights as to their children as mothers do in situations like this. And sometimes that depends on if they were ever married to the mother and things like that, depending on the state. But it's important that that we hear people in these type of situations out, and we give people the proper information, so then they can follow up. So then things like this that happened to Paisley don't happen. And I'm talking about that on either side, right? Because fathers certainly can be the aggressor, or they also can bring in abusive people into their life, where the stepmother or the girlfriend can be abusive as well. One of the elements that significantly, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but one of the elements that significantly increases child abuse in a home is when I say introducing, bringing step parents into a child's home. Now, I'm not saying that to scare people off from moving forward. I'm a stepfather. I have a wife who's a stepmother to my biological children and things like that. And, we have a happy, healthy relationship. However, it is important that for those of you who are looking at becoming a blended family, that you consider extending that for the process of understanding who the person is that you're with, right? To make sure, right, to really ensure that you're bringing in a safe person, around your children, and hopefully, and I know co-parenting can be very difficult for a lot of people, but hopefully your co-parent would be on the same page with that as well.
To bring in Lieutenant Paul Bloom of the Marion County Sheriff's Office to talk about these upgraded charges, and also Paisley Brown's mother now facing charges in this case. So Lieutenant Bloom, thanks so much for coming back on. I know that when we talked a couple of weeks ago, the investigation was still ongoing. So bring me up to speed on what you all found.
This recent developments here in the last, were really overnight. It has been a continuation of this case since February 19th. We first learned of the horrific murder of this child. Our detectives began investigating and speaking with all the witnesses. And we may have mentioned before, but there were 5 children in ages ranging from 1 to 9 that are in this house at various times. So I know there's been a lot of, patience tends to run thin, and we want this. A lot of folks say, hey, we want this mother arrested. Why is she not being arrested? But also justice has to run its course. I realize the patience is running thin, but justice has to run its course. And our detectives had the unenviable job of interviewing children about the most horrific event in their little lives, and extracting that information from them, and the counselors and all that work with them just did a great job. But it takes a little bit. We piece it together. And last night, the mother was arrested, Miss Kendrick. She's charged with the child neglect. And we're not stopping there. The investigation is continuing. We were talking to additional victims. In fact, Mr. Coombs, who was charged with homicide, we received a report back from the coroner's office indicating that the death was a result of homicide. And so he was charged with that. And then he additionally received more charges for other victims, other child victims, and besides the Paisley that he murdered. And he has some additional charges placed on him as well. So both of them, the good news is both of them are sitting in our jail today with no bond. They're not getting out, and the children are safe. We're working with these kids and providing any and all resources to them to keep them safe and make sure that they're not faced with this again.
How did you uncover the abuse, the alleged abuse of the other children? Was it because they revealed it in these interviews and, were witnesses to what happened to Paisley?
That's just it. And getting a young child to talk about something that's so scary, so frightening and nightmarish is not something that happens quickly. So as the days go on, and it's true with a lot of victims, they remember more after the incident has happened. And so with patience and speaking with these children and finding out we have licensed counselors and that conduct these interviews, and we get this information, and the mother, Miss Kendrick, she did not deny it. She admitted her involvement in this and was charged accordingly. So I think with real positivity, I believe from all my heart there's going to be more charges coming forward as we speak with more victims and get deeper into this case.
More charges against Jennifer Kendrick.
That's correct. Yeah, she's this child. The details of this child being tied up and I say punished. They say punished. She was complicit with, in the probable cause affidavit confirms that she knew this was happening. She's responsible. And at some point, someone asked me, why would this happen? I said, well, it's priorities. Her priorities and selfishness led to this. Your children, once you become a parent, any priorities that you had are old. Your new priority is your child, and you are responsible completely for their safety, well-being, and happiness. So she abandoned that, and she's been charged accordingly, and she is right where she needs to be.
What were her priorities? Because the last time we spoke, you said that she wasn't working outside the home.
So she may have had a little job. We don't know. She the day that this happened, she was in the city getting her nails done and gets a call that her child is unresponsive. Most parents, that's the worst news you ever would get. You would be calling 911. Multiple people would be calling 911, but we received no 911 call. Not more than 40 minutes later, she drives home. And then somebody else asked them, have you called 911? And then they finally dialed 911. Would that have saved this child's life? We don't know. Don't know that, but would have been the right thing to do. Absolutely. She failed in that sense. And so when you ask about her priorities, I think her priorities are herself, very selfish, to place your children into a position where you know abuse was happening, and you didn't deny that, but you allowed that to continue. And that's where her priorities lie.
So not only are her priorities messed up, there's likely a reason why they didn't call 911. They knew that they had taken it too far. One of the things I always take a look at, and I like to take a look at, is for example, like people who lie. I say, and I ask people, if they, we look at the benefit that someone has to lying, right, and covering something up. And so when people say like, well, did that person know? Well, of course they did, because if they didn't know, then there would be no reason to lie, right? You look at that type of behavior. In this situation, there's a reason why she didn't want to call 911. She knew what happened. She knew the events that led up to Paisley being limp, Paisley ultimately passing away, right? She was aware and likely in denial that it had gotten to that extent. So It may or may not even need to come up in trial, but they'll likely talk about her not calling 911. But in terms of the motives of not calling 911, I think it's very telling that she was very aware of the behavior that led up to that point.
What is her relationship with Jerome Kums? I know he was quote unquote babysitting, if you want to call it that, these kids. Yeah. But is there more to the relationship?
Yeah, we believe this is her boyfriend, and they're living there at home together. And these children, people have asked about the relationship, but we can't reveal the relationship to either one of them in that just because based on the charges, but trying to protect the children. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you the children were familiar with that home. This is where these children lived and stayed. But yes, he was her boyfriend.
He was her boyfriend. They were a couple. This is just horrific. And it seems to me that I'm just flabbergasted. I'm at a loss. Had they been together a really long time, because, your priority should be, as we talked about earlier, this health and safety of your child. But, she's out getting her nails done. She's doing whatever and not even returning home when she finds out her child's unresponsive.
That's right. Yeah. It takes her a while to respond back to her house when you're told that information. And it is shocking. You're right. Anjanette, this is something that even those of us in the business and doing this kind of work every day, it's not well received. It still shocks us. These detectives that worked on this case has kept them up at nights. And again, I just think of the unimaginable and the unenviable position that they had to be in to speak with these child victims and have them recount such horrible things and learn of this. So it's something that we like to think that doesn't happen in our society. Nobody wants to think that, but the unfortunate truth is this does. But right now, with his new charges and additional charges and the mother being arrested, Paisley's small voice is starting to be heard, I think, with justice for her. So we look for that to continue. And the main, I guess the main thing here is that these children are now safe. They're going to experience a new life that is not just clouded with abuse and violence and threats. And so they're going to learn about a whole different world that exists out there is our hope.
It's just absolutely awful, really horrific. Are there any family members of Paisley's that you all have been in touch with? Have they been trying to get in touch with her? I had seen an interview, I think, with like a former stepfather of hers.
So we have been in contact with known family members, and we are working.
So just so you know, for those of you who don't know the type of work I've done in the past, I used to be contracted in cases like this, not murder cases, but in extreme abuse cases, I would get contracted out. And I was a liaison between CPS and the foster homes that children oftentimes would be put in. And sometimes situations like this can be very, very difficult to find parents, because you have to remember that if this is the type of environment that Jennifer not only allowed, but if this is the type of environment that Jennifer was comfortable with, the mother was comfortable with, then there's times where the extended family and extended community that she comes from also isn't too great. And so it can be very difficult to know whether or not that sometimes the extension of the mother or the abusive home wasn't necessarily okay with it, or isn't suitable to take in children, whether that be because of alcoholism, drugs. They can't afford to, especially when we're talking about 5 children, when they can't, if they can't, because in situations like this, in any situation, you really don't want to split up siblings. So, so to try to foster children into the other homes, let's say a grandmother or sisters, sometimes is just as difficult as finding like a good foster home for them as well. The other thing I want to say about this is that at times, and I've seen, and I'm going to get into bias as well, they have a father, right? The fathers are looking for them. At least one of the fathers. It sounds like she has a couple of fathers in this situation that are looking for them. And I've seen cases where the fathers are looking for them. They want their children. They want to have access to the children. The fathers are more than capable, more than ready, more than able, more than willing. They might come from a good home and have a happy, healthy home, for them. And the foster care, the people who are in the positions that I was in, would just completely overlook it and would just assume. Right. And this goes back to the gender bias I was talking about, that the fathers weren't capable and the fathers weren't around because the fathers chose not to be a part of their life. And again, going back to what I was talking about before, that's not always the case. Right. And in some situations like this, sometimes the father, they just genuinely haven't reached out. Right. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, not only in the short term of finding them, make sure that their immediate needs are taken care of in terms of the children, but also what this is going to look like for the children long term. Obviously, this is going to be very traumatizing for them, losing a sibling regardless. But how would this play out? If they go back to their fathers, now we're talking about separating siblings. If they find a foster home, that's also not necessarily good for them because they're being taken away from biological family. So let me know your thoughts about that in the comments below, but let's continue.
With the Department of Children's and Families here in Florida, I know we were being asked, well, where are the children now? We cannot disclose that other than that we've relinquished them to the care of the Department of Children's and Families. And they're going to speak with family members and find the most suitable location for these children to enjoy a happy life that they deserve and get as far away as we can from that type of abusive relationships.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hope that they are in really good environments now. Obviously, they are not in the environment they were in before. Obviously, this will go in front of a grand jury at some point, and they're both now in your jail. When do you think other charges could be filed against Jennifer Kendrick? So
for me to put a timeline on it, it's kind of difficult. I know just from the time of the incident to today, it's been a little bit, but and again, we're dealing with children victims, so a little slower extracting that information. But it could be in the coming days, it could be in the coming weeks. But I feel very good, very strongly that based on what we're already learning, that she does stand a good chance to gain some more charges, well-deserved charges.
Well, Lieutenant.
All right, that's all I got for you today. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to check out my playlist where I have other videos that are very similar. Also, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you're notified each and every time I upload a new video. With all that being said, thank you very much, and I will see you in the next video. You guys have a good one.